Norway is renowned not only for its stunning fjords, majestic snow-capped peaks, lush green forests and thundering waterfalls, but also for its northern lights and thrilling outdoor activities like hiking and kayaking. It is situated on the western part of the Scandinavian peninsula, bordering Sweden, Finland and Russia in the east. Nearly 50% of its population resides in the southern region around Oslo, the capital city. The country is predominantly mountainous, with approximately two-thirds of its terrain featuring mountains. Despite its vast expanse of roughly 365,000 square kilometers, this Nordic nation is home to a modest population of about 5.5 million people, resulting in a sparse population density of just 17 people per square kilometer, while only 3% of the land is arable. Norway has the second longest coastline in the world, surpassed only by Canada. It is characterized by rugged mountains and over 1,000 fjords, which has fostered the development of a strong maritime culture from early on. It has a long and rich history in shipbuilding, renowned for crafting some of the world's most advanced and innovative vessels. Coastal towns would often collaborate on ship construction, recognizing its critical importance for their survival and prosperity, and shares in the ship ownership would be divided amongst nearly everyone who participated in shipbuilding. This led to decentralization of wealth and ownership. This cooperative nature that developed in the Norwegian society influences the country's economy even today. It has a significant presence of cooperatives across various sectors, for example, housing cooperatives and credit unions, reflecting a strong tradition of collective ownership and democratic management. Its proficiency in shipbuilding would prove essential for advancing its oil and gas infrastructure projects centuries later. Norway's geographical potential was increased further with the advent of hydroelectric power by the end of the 19th century. In fact, it was the first country to develop hydroelectric power. It is home to numerous rivers originating in the mountains and cascading down steep slopes. These rivers are nourished by westerly winds that deliver substantial precipitation, creating ideal conditions for hydroelectric generation. As a result, Norway has become the seventh largest producer of hydroelectric power globally. Due to climate change, the region is currently experiencing increased rainfall, with projections indicating that this trend will continue in the future. This enhanced precipitation is expected to further boost its capacity for hydropower generation. Hammerfest, situated well north of the Arctic Circle, became the first town in Norway to have electric street lighting. Oslo soon followed, implementing both electric street lighting and electric public rail transportation in the 1890s. Norway started permitting foreign companies with advanced expertise to begin constructing dams, aiming to unlock the country's hydroelectric potential. A significant political issue was securing national control over waterfalls. However, a rapid nationalization of assets owned by foreign investors could deter future investment and prompt investors to withdraw. To address this, a comprehensive legal framework was established between 1906 and 1917. Under this framework, foreign companies were required to transfer ownership of the hydroelectric dams they constructed back to the Norwegian government without compensation after a typical operational period of 60 years. This arrangement allowed foreign companies ample time to achieve a return on their investments while enabling Norway to maintain control over its resources. Consequently, 90% of Norway's hydropower capacity is now publicly owned and distributed across municipalities and counties. This is one of the reasons why it was already a prosperous, highly industrialized, democratic country with low corruption levels by the time oil and natural gas were discovered. Contrary to what many people believe, Norway was not a poor country before oil was discovered on the Norwegian continental shelf. Historical national accounts show that Norway's wealth was close to the Western European average in the early 19th century. From the 1840s to the mid-1870s, also known as the Great Boom, Norway experienced very high growth rates driven by a surge in foreign trade. A key factor in its high growth was its proximity to the UK, which was a major trading partner and a crucial source of machinery and technical expertise. As long as the UK did well, Norway also benefited economically. During this period, significant improvements in agricultural productivity and impressive gains in foreign trade helped the nation move beyond the Malthusian trap. This meant that increases in food production were no longer offset by population growth. Instead, rising labor productivity in agriculture and fishing allowed surplus labor to shift into new industries, accelerating economic growth. It emerged as a significant force in shipping, owning about 7% of the world's fleet by 1875. From 1843 to 1873, GDP per capita in Norway grew at a compound annual rate of 1.8%, significantly exceeding the European average. This period of growth was followed by a phase of relative stagnation until the 1890s, when the country underwent rapid industrialization fueled by hydroelectric power. The prolonged depression from the mid-1870s to the early 1890s severely impacted the Norwegian economy. GDP stagnated during the mid-1870s and both the early and late 1880s, while prices continued to decline until the 1890s. Following this period, Norway experienced a significant wave of industrialization. The pulp and paper industries began to expand rapidly in the 1890s, and the chemical industry grew even more swiftly in the subsequent years. Since 1905, when Norsk Hydro was founded, the manufacturing sector linked to hydroelectric power has seen substantial growth and development. In 1938, Norway's GDP per capita was higher than countries like Italy, Spain, and Japan. The discovery of oil and gas on the Norwegian continental shelf ushered in a new era of higher growth rates compared to most Western economies. As a result, Norway achieved one of the highest scores in the United Nations Human Development Index during the first 2 decades of the 21st century, reflecting its high standards of living and overall human development. In the late 1950s, very few anticipated that the Norwegian continental shelf might hold oil and gas reserves. A letter dated February 25, 1958 from the Geological Survey of Norway to the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs indicated that the likelihood of discovering oil off the Norwegian coastline was negligible. However, the discovery of natural gas at Groningen in the Netherlands just 1 year later in 1959 prompted a reassessment of the petroleum potential in the North Sea. In March 1965, the boundaries for oil exploration in the North Sea were established, and luckily for Norway, along the median line dividing the area between neighboring countries. This decision hugely benefited the Norwegians when the Statfjord field was discovered along the median line, and 85% of it fell into Norway's territory. First licensing round was announced in 1965, and the first oil discovery was made on the Balder field in 1967. At the time, however, it was deemed economically unviable, and it took another 30 years before the field was developed. Just before Christmas in 1969, Phillips informed the Norwegian authorities of the discovery of Ekofisk, which would go on to become one of the largest offshore oil fields ever found. This marked the beginning of Norway's significant success in the oil industry. Production from Ekofisk commenced on June 15, 1971 and was followed by a series of major discoveries in the subsequent years. For example, Gullfast, Troll and Snehvit. Troll platform with a height of 472 meters is the tallest structure to be ever moved in humanity's recorded history. A petroleum company, Statoil, was formed in 1972 by the Norwegian government. Its name would later change to Equinor, which is today one of the largest suppliers of energy to Europe. The company was privatized and converted into a public limited company in 2001, subsequently being listed in both the Oslo Stock Exchange and the New York Stock Exchange. Its oil exports saw a significant boost as a result of the European Union reducing its oil imports from Russia following the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Norwegian oil exports to the EU increased substantially. For instance, in 2022, its crude oil exports to the EU were approximately 24% higher than in 2021. The increased oil exports contributed positively to its economy, and in 2022, the total oil and gas revenues saw a significant rise. According to Statistics Norway, the country's petroleum revenue was about 1,070 billion Norwegian krone in 2022, a sharp increase from 721 billion Norwegian krone in 2021. Today, Norway ranks as the top oil and natural gas producer in Europe, excluding Russia, but it has not descended into the archetypal petrostate marked by corruption and autocratic rule, for example, Iraq, Venezuela, Russia, and Saudi Arabia. One of the principal factors is that by the time oil was discovered in Norway, the country already possessed a stable, affluent, and equitable economy with high living standards. Its public institutions were well established with robust checks and balances. Social scientists and economists have argued that Norway functioned as a civil servant state by the early 20th century with a bureaucracy that was independent, relatively incorruptible, and highly specialized. The democratic system was characterized by participatory, transparent, and stable governance, while the judiciary remained autonomous. Consequently, its approach to governance and policy making has been both rule-based and incremental. This stood in sharp contrast to other petrostates where political leaders often became entangled in the anticipated revenue windfalls and underestimated the complexities of the emerging industry due to their lack of expertise. In such countries, existing state institutions were often overshadowed by the oil sector and new institutions were established to support it, thereby entrenching the state's dependency on hydrocarbons. In 1991, the Norwegian government established the Petroleum Fund to shield the nation from the volatile boom and bust cycles associated with oil. The strategy was to prevent oil export revenues from being converted into domestic currency, thereby avoiding pressure on the exchange rate and reducing the government's reliance on oil revenues for its budget. Instead, these revenues were channeled into a fund that invested in international financial markets. To ensure prudent management and preserve the fund size, a fiscal rule was implemented to restrict government withdrawals to only up to the expected real return on the fund, which is typically around 3% of the fund's value. Over time, this fund has grown into the world's largest sovereign wealth fund, boasting assets exceeding $1.71 trillion, twice the size of Norway's GDP, that translates to $307,000 per Norwegian citizen. In fact, the annual returns of the fund often surpass the income generated from Norway's oil sales. Reflective of Norway's commitment to transparency and sound administration, the fund is independently managed and all its investments are publicly listed online. Although now named the Government Pension Fund, this title is largely nominal as Norway's pensions are funded through domestic tax revenues rather than this fund. In Norway, you can actually look up your neighbor's salaries and taxes online. The government makes this data public for transparency, but of course, privacy rules still apply to keep things respectful. Norway's wealth and influence stem from several factors, including its colossal sovereign wealth fund and its abundant and judiciously managed oil and gas reserves ensure enduring economic stability. The nation boasts an impressive GDP per capita and maintains low unemployment rates. Its extensive social welfare system, coupled with political stability and exemplary governance, fortify its prosperity. Norway is a front-runner in renewable energy, particularly hydroelectric power, and engages actively in global diplomacy and humanitarian efforts. Its commitment to sustainability and innovation further enhance its global stature and economic prosperity.